We're going to put our hands and we're going to do a shimmy up. We breathe in, out, in, and out. Just do a little light yoga to get comfortable. We breathe in, right hand out, in, out, in, out, in, out. Hands behind your back. Breathe in as we arch back, out, forward, in, up, out, change your grip. One more time, arch back, out, forward, in, up, out, hands on the knees. We're going to rotate from the hips 3 times in one direction. And then 3 times in the opposite direction. Oh, Adela, we missed you in the jungle. It would have been glorious to have you there. We're going to get you to the next one for sure. Good. We're going to go ahead and switch our legs and even out the other side. This one we can just do together without any prompting. You know how to do it. Okay. We'll do a little Qigong to get comfortable. So everybody knows these, so I don't have to describe them. Polly, if you don't know them on Facebook, you can just follow along. I will describe one, it's easy. So we'll just do a couple movements so we can sit a little longer. So we breathe in and out 3 more times. Next movement, we breathe in, hands up to the shoulders, out as they go down. We'll do it 3 more times. Fingertips together. Breathe in up the midline, out, down and around. We'll do it 3 more times. The third time, we'll make that little triangle in front of our foreheads. Breathe in as we scoot behind us. Out as we raise to head height. 3 more times. On the third time, we're going to make that same triangle. Breathe into your hands. Breathe out, triangle goes down to your belly button, fingers below, drop your shoulders. You breathe into that triangle 3 times. Okay, good. All right, let's go ahead and sit for 30 minutes today, since we got seasoned veterans here.
45.
We could sit 45. I'm good. You remember it forever, Brian.
All right.
We'll put our hands together. We'll give it a little half bow. You can rub your hands together, create a little friction. You can put those juicy hands on your face, your eyes. You can run them through your hair, rub down your ears towards the lobes to wake yourself up. You can tap out your chest, your traps. Give your belly a nice little rub. You can massage your lower back, extend your legs, make yourself comfortable. So we're going to have the last question and answer of the year. Oh, you guys better have some amazing questions ready in the queue. I always like, it's a very common thing that in temples they have a long sit or they sit strong on New Year's Eve. The reason for that is oftentimes it's within the Kyoche season. Kyoche is the retreat season. In Korea, they do 3 months in the winter, 3 months in the summer. So traditionally, during the Buddhist time, the Buddha just wandered everywhere. So one of the importance and the usefulnesses of wandering is you don't get fixed. And when you get fixed, you have fixed opinions, you have fixed attachments. So one of the things he does, he just wandered everywhere and he taught. But in India, they have a rainy season. So for 3 months, there's so much rain, they were kind of locked into one place. As they got locked into one place, because the Buddha in his time, he taught for about 40 years. He became enlightened around, it's funny, they all become enlightened around the same time, right? Like Jesus was like 36 or something when he died.
33.
33. I should ask, she knows. She can quote passage and verse. I think the Buddha was like 36, but there is a time in their 30s when you have somebody who's particularly interested in figuring out the question of life and death, and they also have the vigor of body, then you can have people have big breakthroughs in their 30s, right? It can definitely happen at any age. In their 20s, sometimes people have too many passions, physical passions, men looking for girls, girls looking for boys, etc. And then when we get older, like past your 50s and things like that, it's not that it can't happen. It happens a lot, by the way, because you put down the concerns of the world, and then you're not as focused on that. So your mind can be just more present with wanting to figure out the question of life and death. But the body can have less vigor. So there can be some difficulty there. So as the Buddha wandered around for about 40 years teaching, eventually after he died, what happened is that there's so much rain and he had a lot of followers, and these followers just started saying, well, we got all this rain, let's just hold up here and let's build a structure. So then temples started to arise, and from these temples came like teaching universities, etc., etc. In Asia and Korea specifically, they hold to the tradition of the 3-month summer because that's when it rains, but it's also cold. So in these cold climates, you see that they'll also do a 3-month winter because it's cold. So this tradition is particularly strong in Asia. In fact, there's really only one temple in all of America that sits for a 3-month stretch still. And that's actually a Korean temple in Rhode Island, Providence Zen Center. The Japanese tradition, they started to mix a lot with laity. So there's definitely temples where there's only monks and they're doing meditation. But then lay people would come to meditate, but they didn't have 3 months. So they started meditating for 1 week. So that's a sesshin, and that's the tradition that's kind of been adopted in the West because the Zen idea, Zen is a Japanese translation of the word sun in Korean and a Japanese translation of the word Chan in Chinese. They're the same root. So it started to be like 1-week retreats. This process, though, when he wandered and he taught, it helped to kind of slough off these attachments of being fixed into things. So remember that this arising, this is one of the fallacies. People think that having craving is bad. It's not bad. It's funny, like the original monks, like after the Buddha died, they had these councils and they'd get together and they'd talk about philosophical things. And one of the questions was, can an enlightened person still get wet dreams? It's funny the things they talked about, and they debated very vigorously. There were those that said yes, those that said no, right? So one, I think that it's not that important to talk about. But two, the teaching point that I'm trying to make is that this desire, like if you see, for example, me, I like women, I have a wife, just my preference. But if I see a beautiful woman, recognizing beauty is fine. Even having a desire that rises is perfectly natural. But if you see this desire early, what normally happens is desire arises, thought binds with it, and then you create fantasy. When you create fantasy, then it grows and it becomes lusty, and then you chase it and it becomes a story, right? Then you can have an attachment. An attachment is a desire to have this story become true. And then you can do actions that have karmic consequences. If you act on that action, you can hurt that person's life. You can hurt your own life in ways that have real consequences, right? So arisings are not bad. They're just arisings. It's this attachment to say that I must get my way. That is the spark of suffering, okay? So that being said, on the solstice, the shortest night of the year in which we're most afraid, the creepy crawlies, the goblins come out, and we seek comfort in the light, in the resurrection and the birth of Jesus, and well, the birth of Jesus close to the date, and also in the enlightenment of the Buddha, and these things that give man renewed hope. Do you have any questions, Brian or Allie? Anything you'd like to say, a comment or a question?
I have a tiny thing. You're good. Just something that I've been observing over the last little while. My husband jokingly refers to it as my Zen powers, but mostly it's really just feeling gratitude, and maybe it's the time of year, but just feeling a lot of gratitude for my Zen power that I've cultivated because of what you've taught us, Dr. Healy. So anyway, I'm just feeling gratitude for that, but it's really that space between thought and action, or, I do things like I'm itchy. And so instead of scratching, I observe, or I have insomnia and I observe, well, what does that feel like? And I'm hungry. What does that feel like? Being able to just stop and observe. It feels like a superpower to me because I've never had that in my life. And so I'm just feeling really grateful for that today and lately. Thank you.
Thank you. It is a superpower, by the way. It's a superpower that is the birthright of every human being that very few human beings exercise. And when you exercise that superpower, it just grows. Awareness grows. Right? I like to use the words panoramic awareness or panoramic vision. This ability to see all around and to experience all around instead of just our narrow train of thinking. So it's interesting because you'll see, for example, other people will comment on it, right? Like your husband comments on it. So these are stages along the way that if we want to think about, like, are we making progress? Because most of the time we're just sitting here and it can be dull. And you're like, what the hell? Why am I doing this? I keep coming back. But you have these signs that you're making progress, for lack of a better term, right? So, and it's even noticeable by other people. Another of the natural arisings that's really useful is this feeling of gratitude. It's amazing how naturally it arises and how it's it feels not only good, but it's a wonderful thing to share. It's a wonderful thing to voice. So even, for example, when Gilbert and I were in Peru and before our ceremonies, Don Jose would just ask, does anybody have anything to say? Everybody who had anything to say always started with gratitude. People are just so thankful that someone cares about them, is taking the time to be present with them, to help usher them through difficult times. Because often in this world, we feel isolated and alone and we don't feel cared for. So gratitude is a tremendous a natural arising. That's part of the birthright and the true nature of human beings, is we're thankful. And what's more interesting is when the thankfulness starts to become a little less specific, because we get thankful to people that help us, the situations, but what about thankfulness for the air we breathe? Gratitude for the food we eat, gratitude for sunlight, all these wonderful things that are happening to us all the time. You know, like we're in Florida, so when it's kind of cloudy and rainy lately, but we have such nice weather for several months, right? Every time I open the door and I go outside, I'm like, man, I like Florida until April. And then I'm like, I don't like Florida. But for those months, I really like Florida. There's gratitude and it's natural. When I saw like the monk, and I was talking to the monk when I was in temple and I had my awakening experience where I was in a room with other people. And he was talking about, because he sits on a higher cushion. And he said something to me. He gave me some praise. I've been working like this for decades. And in Korea, there's a lot of structure. Monks are high up and we're just but lowly, you know, temple laity. And oftentimes it's very militant and there's not a lot of praise. And people like us, you're taking time out of your day. You got a child, you know. I always got a husband who's getting drunk right next door. So he's just waiting for her in New Caledonia. It's a real place. I'm not even making that up.
That's true.
So I got a family, I got a child waiting for me. And we all got things to do, but we're working hard. And the monk was talking and he was mentioning, he actually said some praise to me. He's like, this man over here, he's actually worked really hard. And it made me cry, but I was embarrassed. I was holding it back because I was in a room of 20 other people and my heart was so open. I was just had no defenses. And I was like quivery lip, trying to like really lock it down as tears ran down my face. And he looked at me and he said, you know, even the gratitude and the acceptance of praise is something that has to be learned. He's like, when I first became a monk and I had to start sitting on high cushions, I was really embarrassed, is what he said. It's embarrassing to put on airs, to put on a fancy robe, to sit above people. Some monks like it, but you can smell the stink of ego on people pretty easy. Most people got a pretty good sense of it for people. But when they're humble and they're doing it, it's hard for them. It's like that had to be learned. I had to cultivate that as a skill. There's gratefulness, and he accepts this as a position because he's trying to be kind of like a symbol for other people. Being a monk is not an easy job. Like waking up early, people always think you can't have sex. Oh my God, you can't eat the food you want. You got to wake up early. They think those are the hard things. Nope. The hard things is people's expectations of you. Monks are regular people, but they got to sit there and they got to act properly because other people are judging them all the time, all the time. So when monks find people that it's easy to hang out with, you know how many monks I've had a drink with? Quite a few, by the way, quite a few. I've never really seen them get drunk, but they'll have like 1 or 2 drinks. You know how many monks I've eaten meat with? In Korea, people think, oh, monks can't eat meat, but that's not in the scriptures. But I've had meat with monks several times, quite a bit. Some countries, it's a lot stricter, like in South Asia. But they're just regular people and they're performing a service and they're trying to do their best. So as we all kind of move through life, let's have a little bit of a soft spot for everybody. Even teaching figures, we hold them in such high esteem, and when they mess up, it really lets us down. But they're regular people. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. Brian, were you going to say something? Do you have a question or a comment?
Starting with gratitude.
I want to give one piece of homework for Allie, because I was thinking about her and her lingering resentment to Jesus. So Allie, this is homework if you'd like to accept it.
I would love to.
What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to talk to Jesus. What that means is in the past, when you talk to Jesus, we always had to pray. We had to pray in this reverential way, right? And we had fear of retribution, and we had feelings of unworthiness of grace. And we had all these feelings of having to do things because our preachers told us, our parents told us, and everybody in our community expected this of us, right? But I want you to just have a conversation with Jesus, just like Jesus was a friend. And just just have a conversation, someplace in which you're stable and, not when you're drinking with your husband. And just say, hey, Jesus, it's been a long time. And just kind of tell him as if he's a non-threatening friend sitting in front of you, someone whom you've shared tremendous intimacy with, by the way. Just have a conversation and say everything in your heart, and don't be scared he's going to judge you. Like, Jesus, I'm still mad at you. I feel like a sense of resentment at you, and I also miss you. And I'm also thankful for you, or whatever else that comes in your heart. Just try it. Okay?
What about writing it down?
Sure, writing is great. Some people, it's better. So just find an outlet to have a communication experience where you can literally say or write down whatever you want. Does that sound useful? Yeah.
Thank you.
Can be surprisingly powerful. Okay, and if you don't mind, I'd like you to report back on that.
Absolutely.
You can make it into a novella, Conversations with Jesus.
Okay.
Please, Brian, I'm sorry to cut you off.
That's all good. It's pretty much on brand with everything else. I grew up in the church as well, right? And there was a part of me where I ran away from it because all the pressure that gets put on you. So running away, looking for other things. And then I met my ex-wife a long time ago, and her family were oriented towards Buddhist. So I didn't really practice, but I was like, I like this, right? I can understand this because there's not a lot of pressure on me to have to show up in these ways that people were making me show up. But long story short, I've been reading, and I just finished a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Going Home, the Buddha and Jesus as Brothers. And he does a really good job at putting these two figures in this space where religiosity is out of view, but still things like having faith and practicing and all these things are necessary, right? Especially from the Western world where we don't really have all the context to Buddhism without a lot of study, but we do have a closer context to, Christianity. And there was a part in the book that really hit me when he mentioned going back home to your family, going back home to your religion, going back to your faith, not really religion, but back to your faith, and understanding how to teach the people from where you came how to start bridging gaps for themselves as well. And that's really been sitting with me lately because my mom is really religious, and every time she talks about the Bible, it kind of just like picks at my skin a little bit. But I started dropping that notion of I know better, or the pressure is always on me. And I'm able to have conversations with her now that aren't just about religion, but are about is there even a difference? Is there a separation between us and God and Jesus? And what was the point of the whole thing in the first place? And being able to have these conversations without an argument or without some kind of resistance has been really helpful, especially in the groups that I work in that are specifically aligned with Christianity. Being able to go into those places, talk to them, and introduce things that we've been learning here without them being offensive, and still being able to bridge gaps and have communication with people. So I'm really grateful that for this space, and it's been teaching me how to be able to not just be here, but go out and be accepting of other people and hopefully teach what I've been learning moving forward.
That's a tremendous thing. I think that this is very useful for us to try to remember that building the bridges is really the way to go. Creating this, you see a lot of groups or people who believe a certain thing, and it becomes a lot of like our way or the highway, right? It's almost like a way to protect themselves where they have to be kind of insular because their belief system is not quite strong enough to be open because it feels assaulted, okay? So my friend always said, he's like, I just try to bring more light than heat. So I like the way he used to say that. Like when you have a confrontation, argument, or whatever conversation, can you bring more light than heat, right? build these bridges. So that's a wonderful thing to realize, especially considering, you haven't been practicing that long in this way. Normally, when people are new to something, they can start to attack it with a fervor, and then they can start to make fun of things. I have to admit that when I was a younger man and I was studying Buddhism kind of intellectually and academically, I would use my intellect as kind of like a weapon. I would say, I know better. And I would logically pick apart other people and beat them with it. And it was a terrible thing to do. It was a sign of actually ego due to fear, a feeling of unworthiness, a feeling of being small. So I had to use the only tool that I knew how, my intellect, to try to beat up on others to feel bigger. It took me a while to kind of realize that, So you're learning those kind of lessons very quickly, which is amazing. I was talking to Gilbert a little bit about the sequence of books, and I think that it might be useful for us when we talk to people and try to recommend books. What is a good sequence of books? So Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind is a really interesting and simple, easy read. It's a good intro. So I like that as an intro. Gilbert has a particular sequence, which is actually not bad. He starts with the untethered soul, the surrender experience, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, then the 3 pillars of Zen. 3 pillars of Zen is more heady, and it's also very, very focused on what is using this Zen experience to create an awakening. So I like that sequence. I like also the Compass of Zen, because the Compass of Zen has a lot of the background of the Korean tradition that I came from. And it talks about the specific koan tradition of that and things like that. It's a little heady, but it's not as heady as 3 pillars of Zen. But 3 pillars of Zen is a very good example of how to use Zen traditions with the awakening experience. There's also another book that I like, When People Have Hard Times, by Penman Chodron. It's called When Things Fall Apart. I really like to recommend that book because a lot of people come to different traditions when their original tradition is not quite stable for them. They're like, I can't quite buy into going to church anymore. It's funny, both Gilbert and Adela, when you went to Soul Quest, they had the Soul Quest Manifesto, and a lot of the language of the manifesto is about being rebellious, being true to yourself, right? Because the people that are going to do ayahuasca, they're doing other things. They're looking for answers outside the mainstream. It's not something that's really supported by all of our friends and family. I think very, very few people went and did ayahuasca, and everybody that they knew said, that's great, let's go do that. Most people are like, that sounds crazy, but you went and did it anyway, right? So it kind of talks to your rebellious nature. But this ability to see that process and to look at a tradition, and you're kind of making it your own, right? You're pulling from the things that your Christian background, you're learning these new things, and you're creating something very unique. So the kind of Buddhist practice that's in America is different from Asia. And American Buddhists are sometimes a little bit, nervous because they think, ooh, we're not the original Buddhism. So they're always talking about the differences. And Asian Buddhism would be like, we're the original Buddhism, and they can kind of be proud of it. But all that doesn't really mean anything for me anyway. For me, I like to emphasize, what is the individual experience? How does it affect you? How can we put it into practice? Let's not talk about all this other stuff unless it's going to help us wake up. That's the point. Can it help us wake up? Can it help us drop our karma? Can it help us create bridges with ourselves and other people? Okay, that's the point. We don't need to be smarter than other people. We don't need to be more proud of ourselves than other people. That just makes people alienated. Okay? We don't need to have a lot of conversations about better. It's better. It's better. So one of the ways to create bridges when you were talking, Brian, is to ask about their personal experience. Mom, I get it. You're really into the Bible, you're into Christianity, tell me about your faith. What does that do for you? Do you have this fear, all this other stuff? And then you're like, Mom, I also have fear. And when I have fear, I do things like I try to be present with that fear and I try to experience it, right? Sometimes I might repeat something, just like you can repeat, God is love, or though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, or whatever. When I do that, it calms me down and it gives my mind something to do other than be afraid. There's lots of ways to interject. I was speaking with a patient the other day, they're a young couple, very Christian couple, and she's a very high anxiety patient. She's got a lot of issues. And I was talking about coaching and saying, well, we could talk about, and you could tell if you mentioned anything that's specifically not Christian, she'd get really tense because she thinks someone's going to like dump their views on her. But because she has so much stress, I was like, all right, I asked her, I was like, what percentage of your thinking would you say is negative? And she said 85%. I was like, okay. So you realize that 85% of your thinking is actually hurting your body. It's hurting your mind. It's hurting you. She's like, yeah, I get that. I don't know what to do about that. I was like, well, do you got a phrase you like? Christian phrase or something like that, a psalm? She didn't really have one. I said, well, for example, God is love. And I even introduced the word mantra and meditation, but I took away the fear. I was like, well, you can use that in a meditative way. Meditation, when I say that, I just mean the ability to be present with what's going on, okay? We don't have to think about any kind of religious anything. It's just this ability to be present, and how can we do that? And a mantra, you don't have to think about it. I'm not going to tell you to go chant Om. It's just a repetitious phrase. Okay, so what if you took this, God is love, what if you just repeated it in the background as you're doing things and it's eating up negative thinking? And then when you're not doing things, you're drinking your yummy Chinese herbs in the morning, you can put it in the foreground and you can have more focus on it, and it starts to give you more focus and clarity, and you can shift gears back and forth. As you start to do this, it eats up negative thinking. Your mind becomes a little bit more clear, less negative thinking, body relaxes more. And then as it starts to become an unconscious habit, it starts to burrow in. And when you have unconscious responses like anger, fear, it'll come out and you won't even know it. Even when you're dreaming. It's funny when you first start practicing in your dreams. It's like tools or techniques or armor when you're having hard dreams that you bring out, that you've done enough to where it's become more ingrained. Okay, so those are not threatening to people when you from whatever religious tradition, because these religious traditions like Christianity, the Judeo-Christian religions and others, they have traditions of contemplation and prayer, but oftentimes they don't have a way to take that technique and to put it in a moment-to-moment experience of life, right? They pray when they pray, but then when they're not praying, they're just doing normal things, which is normally habit. That's how we live our lives, is through habit energy, most of it. And most people will acknowledge that. They'll acknowledge that, okay? So those are little ways to interject, but that's amazing. Gilbert or Adela, do either of you have any comments or questions or anything you'd like to bring up in the last meditation, formal meditation of the year? If you don't, okay.
Of course I have something to say. One of the things I've been noticing, like on a pretty regular basis, because all of my experiences that I've had with Zen and even with ayahuasca, I mean, there have been some intense moments, but they've been very practical in the way they've affected me and have been teaching me. And I've been driving my car for a while when I go to the gym, and I've noticed, like, I start looking up at the sky, and I'm like, wow, I spent so many years driving and never looking up and never enjoying the beauty that's around me. And today I went on a mission and I'm driving and I was like, wow, I'm actually grateful to be alive, and I spent decades in such a deep depression that I was a miserable motherfucker. That's what I was. And, it's just like, wow, this shit is really working. It's awesome. You know what I mean? I'm starting to get some joy in my life.
Yeah.
and some happiness. And just recognizing that was, pretty awesome for me, And the other thing I want to say about Zen is, in my daily meditation, I go through a lot of different processes. And by reading those books, especially the last one I read, the real simple one about Zen, whatever, you mentioned the name. And, it just said something that really just blew my mind. And it's like, whatever's going on in your mind is Zen. Whatever is happening is Zen. And that really helped me because I got to take my doggie to the doctor tomorrow because she's had an issue with scratching. And as I'm meditating, she's banging the floor, bang, 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 bang. And I'm like, you're disturbing my peace. And I just wanted to scream at her. And I didn't. I remembered that. This is part of Zen. The dog annoying me is part of Zen. And then I thought about it later and I was like, wow, that's really helping me to manage my anger impulses that I've had my whole life. So, it's really strange, but just recognizing the simplest things. That's why I love that book. I mean, I'm on the second time reading it because I'm like, wow, because everything basically is Zen. It's just being aware. So yeah, that is really awesome. And the gratitude that we're having, and gratitude seems to be a topic today. So I figured I'd share that with you.
That's amazing. Thank you, Gilbert.
And you were a lot of fun in the jungle, Doc.
It was a tremendous amount of fun. I'm very thankful that you were there. You did actually make me feel quite safe, and you made me feel like I had companionship and a new experience. I do really appreciate you. I'll have to tell everybody when the camera's off a little bit more of the intimate stories that we shared. I'm sure Adele has heard some of them. If not, you're going to get.
Oh, she has. We've laughed a lot. But it was really good, and it's really great because you're very even keeled, and that's really good. You know what I'm saying? So that brings some just some basic calm. But I had a wonderful trip. It was amazing. It really was.
Good.
So thank you also for being there.
This everything is Zen. That's a really lovely expression. One Zen master once said, "Get rid of like and dislike. What need is there for enlightenment?" So if everything is Zen, every arising, dog thumps his tail, thump, 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 thump. Alarm rings in the morning, wah, 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 wah. Car honks as it cuts you off, beep. Your child laughs with that beautiful laughter of children, yee. Your husband drinks his beer, look, 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 ah. It's all Zen. Every arising is truth. In and of itself, it is both imperfect yet perfect in its imperfection. It is a unique arising, wholly complete. This is what can be awakened to. So the language that Sun Sansanim likes to use is the six senses. They can be the six thieves or the six wisdoms. Sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch, thinking. I might have missed one. Anyway, all six of them. When you're attached to them, they're a thief. They take your attention. They take your awareness. They plant the seeds of suffering. But when you're able to just be present with them, everything you see clearly, hear clearly, taste clearly, smell clearly, touch clearly, think clearly, every arising is just as it is. As it is. All Zen, all complete. Every moment. So this is the experience and why people talk about samsara is nirvana. Nirvana is samsara. People think that when they wake up, they're going to go to some better place where all the shit they don't like doesn't exist. But they just wake up to the now where all the shit they don't like is still there, but they're resistant to it relaxes. And they see the beauty in everything, even in the shit they don't like. I've been showing everybody a picture of my jungle toilet and from Peru. Mossy green ass toilet with no cover. You can't sit on. You got bugs in there. I got to look for snakes. You got to hover poop, and men aren't designed for that. I've been showing it with tremendous, it's funny for me. So humor, but also gratitude. It's a funny story, and it's a bridge to cause a little bit of excitement and inspiration for others. And at the same time, it's a place to put my poop. And I'm very grateful for that. Oh, man. When you start seeing more and more joy in the little things, and the heart just starts to relax, it just starts to open up. It just starts to be happy. Like, it's funny how much we don't want to be happy, and we pride ourselves on it, right? We pride ourselves on being miserable fucks. Like, the more cynical we can be, like, the stronger we are, the smarter we are, right? The more cynical we are, where it's actually the more afraid we are. It's the amount of, it's almost directly proportional to the amount of fear that a person holds in their heart. And the more you can let go of fear is almost directly proportional to the amount of joy you have in your heart. Joy, when we talk about basic attributes of human beings, what are human beings born with? They're born with freedom. They're born with this capacity for joy. It's spontaneous and natural. They're born with compassion in relationship to the suffering of others. They're born with clarity, this ability to see cause and effect and understand wisely this discrimination without attachment. This is the nature of a human being, right? And it might suck for us to think that, wow, I had to go on this whole journey of basically wanting to kill myself before I woke up to the fact that I needed to relax. And this whole journey, it's not for naught. There's a purpose to it, right? We learned, we let go of stuff, we grew, our heart grew. And then as we look backwards, it's with gratitude at even the suffering. Man, Jesus, I was mad at you, but you helped me a lot. You gave me friendship, companionship. You helped me not do things that would have hurt myself, right? We have gratitude. Oh, my dad, he was terrible. He used to beat me. He still fed me, though. I don't know. He fed me shitty food, but at least he fed me. He did something, right? He worked with the best of his ability and his mangled concepts of life and all his closed-heartedness, right? So all of these things, it's amazing how much gratitude you can have. It's so much that when you see things, how beautiful they are, they just bring tears sometimes, like the last ceremony in Peru, because we can open our eyes. I didn't cry. I normally cry every time. I'm like a little baby when I do ayahuasca. But I didn't cry. But the fifth ceremony I did, but it was not for any reason of sadness. I was just so thankful, and everything was so beautiful. I just looked around. I surveyed the scene. Don Jose is 65 years old. He's been doing this forever, and he's still getting up. He's still playing all his instruments. And you have Jessie, who's been doing it 16 years, and she's helping out, and she's always there for people. You have Gilbert throwing up. Ugh. You had to puke a bit the fifth ceremony. But then you see, like I see Gilbert doing Qigong. I see him doing it over his body. And I saw, for example, there was another guy who threw up every time, and he threw up the most. Gabriel, man, but he's still thankful. And I saw him, he would always say, gracias. He'd say, thank you. And there was this guy named Jan, and Jan came in there with this big ego and he'd never done anything like that before. And he got his ass kicked the first time. He didn't want to continue. But he manned up, and he's like, I'm going to keep doing it. And his fifth ceremony, he bawled like a baby. He wept unabashedly without pretense. And it was beautiful. It wasn't heart-rendingly sad. It was tears of release. And it was beautiful to see. There's just so much joy in the jungle. There's so much joy now, not like the jungle is any better. I'm just talking about that experience. And I had tears of gratitude also. So for all of those things and for every moment that we have now and for the rest of the time we have these limited bodies, may we all experience the never-ending gratitude that can emerge from an open heart. Okay, that is my wish for all of us. So, Adela, would you like to say any last words? You don't have to, but would you?
No, all I'll say is that those words that you just said about an open heart, that's kind of been the space that I am navigating more and more. That especially through the meditations, which I still resist, but I still do. Gilbert knows all about it. And also the psycho-spiritual coach training that I've been doing since September has kicked my ass in many ways, in really good ways. So I'm feeling more. So that's good.
Yeah. It takes courage. You got to let go of fear because it hurts to expose yourself. It does. Yeah, but it's a necessary process, right? We call it the work for a reason because it's uncomfortable in the beginning, but we know it's necessary, right? Without it, what are we going to do? Are we really going to go back? We're not. I don't see anybody here that's going to go back, which means they're just going to shut their heart and say, I'm just going to sit in my room and shoot heroin. I'm done with the world. Nobody's going to go back at this point, right? You've tasted enough of an open heart to know that you have to continue. You just have, right? I'm almost sorry for it sometimes. They say in Zen, if you take one step, you better be prepared to take them all. That means I got to face my fears? Yeah, sorry. You do. You don't got to face them all day. And it's not going to be as traumatic as you think. But you're going to have to look at them. You're going to have to make friends with the uncomfortable stuff. You're just gonna. All right. Let's end up with 3 rounds of Guan Zembusana. And let's do this. Guan Zembusana is the Bodhisattva compassion. And let's take a second before we start and let's hold somebody in our mind's eye and in our heart, somebody we'd like to dedicate some compassion to. Okay? Let's take a second to do that. And we're going to start in just 1 second. Just see their face. Not only see their face and their body in front of you, see their heart, see their fear, their anxiety, their anger, their resentment, all of these things that are making them feel sad and bitter and all the feelings that are keeping them from opening their heart. And to that person's heart, we're going to chant Guan Zembusana. Guan Zembusana.
Guan Zembusana, Guan Zembusana, Guan Zembusana, Guan Zembusana, Guan Zembusana, Guan Zembusana,
Guan Zembusana, Guan Zembusana, Guan Zembusana, We'll put our hands together and repeat after me. May all beings be grateful.
May
all beings be grateful.
May all beings open their heart.
May
May all beings open their heart.
May all beings experience the joy and freedom which is their birthright.
May all beings experience the joy and freedom that is their birthright.
Shiminpa. All right. Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Bye.
Happy